That's right. It's been a busy morning thus far here in Abilene, and we are happy to be here on KCMO 95.7 FM. In a couple hours, 9 o'clock is when the events get underway here. We'll look forward to having a couple of World War II veterans right here on the show. But now, as we do each and every Thursday morning, we say hello to the mayor of Kansas City, Missouri. Quinton Lucas is on KCMO. Mr. Mayor, good morning. Thanks for being here.
Well, thank you, and I appreciate you having the coverage from Abilene and the Eisenhower Library. I am a fan of history, certainly a fan of the work of American troops to make sure that we had freedom in this world, and so glad that you're recognizing that, our allies, and certainly General Eisenhower. So look forward to watching it later today.
And, hey, by the way, this is a part of your old stomping grounds out this way, if I have that right? At least for a little bit of your early childhood.
You are correct. I like to sometimes claim having some background in the non-Kansas City area parts of Kansas. Great people, great history, and I think a great future. And I'm glad that people are getting a little attention on it today.
Well, obviously today we all know what the story has been in this town over the last 36 hours, and that is the Kansas legislature, speaking of where we are right now, clearly making an overt public play for the Kansas City Chiefs. We've talked about this ad nauseum going back months now since the vote in Jackson County. But you saw the letter written by the Senate President and the Speaker of the House, and your initial reaction to that letter was what?
Well, first of all, as you may or may not know, I actually get along with Kansas Republicans pretty well, probably better than Missouri Republicans. So I always like talking to those gentlemen, particularly Senator Masterson. I think that we have spent so much time and spilt so much ink on an issue that I do think will get figured out, but at the same time, I think it's not something that kind of needs our breathless energy and attention. I frankly stand with people like Missouri House Leader John Patterson yesterday, a Republican of Lee's Summit, and others, who I think in many ways said, calm down. We all will continue to have good conversations with the teams. I understand the Kansans should be part of it too, but as I have said to you a million different times, you got to start with responsibility to the taxpayers. You have to make sure that we're having good, I think, fair conversations. And, everybody can say their different things, but whether it's the Missouri legislature thinking about it or the Kansas legislature, there's no such thing as a free lunch. And so whether it's $1 billion in star bonds, which, by the way, would just be tax dollars redirected from other uses in Kansas, or it's $1 billion stripped out of the Missouri state budget, or $400 or $500 million from the city of Kansas City or Jackson County, I think it's actually important for people to see what makes sense first. What should be invested in, what generates more economic activity. A question I would have certainly with the Speedway area and others is, the whole theory of star bonds is they generate surrounding economic activity. When you have an area that actually, believe it or not, is somewhat built up, what new activity you get? You already have the Legends there. You already have Nebraska Furniture Mart, which actually generates most of the economic activity out there today. Are you getting something new, or does the stadium itself underwrite not just $1 billion in bonds, but a $2 to $3 billion cost? I mean, those are the questions, and that's why I think I'm going to join the more, seasoned leaders who are saying don't freak out. But look, I respect Kansans can do whatever they want. I enjoyed listening to Mr. Masterson's comments, I think, on your show yesterday. I'm for Kansas. I only care about Kansas and all of that. Maybe I have a different perspective. I live in the middle of the KC metro area. It's actually not a long drive to KCK for me. In fact, it's just a few minutes away. I've been to Lee's Summit and Independence this week. I think what's good for Missouri, what's good for Kansas, what's good for the Kansas City metro are good for all of us. And it makes us a better region, makes your job more fun and all of that, and mine easier too. And so I hope they think about the taxpayers, they think about what makes sense and what actually grows the pie in this area rather than just shifts it around.
Well, it's interesting. A lot of what you just said there, I think, rings true for many in the metro right now. But this is not this issue, and it wasn't going into April 2nd in the vote in Jackson County. It's not one that falls along political lines by any stretch of the imagination. There are Republicans and Democrats who are on very different sides of this. Will you make an appeal? Have you made an appeal to Laura Kelly, who has infamously said within the last couple of years, my border war truce with Governor Parson did not include the Kansas City Chiefs? Will you pick up the phone and call the governor of Kansas, who you happen to share a D next to your name with?
But look, I have great respect for Laura Kelly. I think she's a transformative leader, one of the best in this country. And so I have the opportunity to talk to Governor Kelly all the time. We typically keep those conversations confidential, although I stand by her as she's trying to be responsible on tax policy in Kansas, do Medicaid expansion, do the things that really mattered. And by the way, when I was a Kansan and was able to go to early childhood education, where mom was able to get health care, I mean, those are the sorts of things that matter to people as a daily issue. So I do hope that the Kansas legislature has time to look at all of that. I think as we speak to the border war, there was no written exception as to what was in or what was not in the border war truths. But, I think the broader point is this, for anybody who doesn't know what the heck we're talking about when you think about the border war truths, this is exactly it. Right. If you're a policy person who's just sitting back today and wondering and saying, well, goodness, okay, so if Kansas gives $1 billion and if Missouri answers and gives $1 billion, and then if somebody else layers on this, and if the city of Kansas City layers on an incentive, which I would argue to you is actually kind of the difference between Missouri and Kansas, because the county and the cities can tend to do a lot more. Then is that good at the end of the day? If we get to a $2.5 billion incentive to keep the Chiefs in Kansas City, Missouri, is that something that was actually for the better? And is this back and forth actually something that's additive long-term for the taxpayers in our community? If the fundamental theory of the case is we like to have businesses here because having them here, and the teams are businesses too, mean that we can, get better revenue, have more people here, have money spent here, still have good schools and good roads and all of that, is taking all the money that you may generate out of it something that's responsible. Look, I don't know. What I will say is this. I have good relationships, actually, believe it or not, despite what some of my friends may say, with most people in Kansas state politics and, to some extent with those in Missouri state politics, and certainly with both teams. I shared with both teams, both of which I've spoken to. I know the governor of Missouri has as well, that what we're not going to do is do negotiation by press release, have big, loud events, all those sorts of things. I think that speaks to the majority, not just to Kansas City City Hall, but also Governor Parson, Senator Lincoln Huff, and Missouri and others. And I respect that. I'm going to continue to respect that. I don't think the Chiefs want to have to give a new press statement every 4 hours when somebody else says something that may be valid, maybe not. And I frankly don't think, even if you see something pass in the Kansas legislature, that it's, alarm bells thing and everybody's moving. I think this is something that's great fodder for sports talk radio. It's kind of interesting. It's easy to understand. We all have feelings on Arrowhead Stadium. I happen to think it's a great facility. It's a great place to watch a game. I think almost everyone in this city and this world actually thinks that, including FIFA, who are sending World Cup games here as compared to Cincinnati, Washington, Denver, and Nashville. And I think we'll get things figured out over here. But you know what? We'll do the work to do it. But there are a lot of other issues that are really important for us, and I'm going to focus on that and continue to work with Republicans and Democrats in Missouri and Kansas to get it done.
Mayor Quinton Lucas is here on KCMO Talk Radio, and I know you know all this all too well. It's something I've said on the show since this conversation began. And, as someone who had worked in New York City prior to being here, I can promise you nobody cares that the stadium's in New Jersey. I mean, there's no economic development around that stadium. Nobody cares what state it's in. So how do you cut through the political egos here, if at all, and say, should we look at this regionally versus, what the politicians may want to claim some victory in getting a team to their backyard?
I thought a lot about that. And actually, I did a run this morning. I'm wearing a Baker University shirt from Ottawa, Kansas, right? I mean, the reality is, and Pete, you know this better than most because you talk to us on both sides, and you've lived on both sides too. This is one place, people, right? I mean, maybe I shouldn't say this, and this would make me a terrible Missouri governor, but I don't think that's in the cards anytime soon. This is one metro area. And honestly, a new, cool, big thing in Overland Park or Kansas City, Kansas, is good for me sitting in KCMO. Same thing for some great in Lee Summit or Independence or KCMO. And maybe I've seen this more so, and I think you've probably seen the same since I've been a father. Right? There's that new cool rabbit hole thing up in North Kansas City people are telling me about. Not my city, but it's a place I want to take my kid. There are all these other things around the metro. I went to some bounce house party, and that's the business I need to get into. These things that they do for 3- and 4-year-old parties in Prairie Village the other. I mean, at the end of the day, a growing, healthy metro area is what's best for all of us. And, I'm not a Pat Toohey libertarian necessarily and all of that, nor am I an uber progressive of, kind of some of those who are against the stadium for those different reasons. But it does kind of ring true after a while if you say, wait a second, what are we doing? right? And I know everybody wants to win, and having cool stuff is great and all of that. But, as somebody who will go to games anywhere and all of that, we need to build the financial case. And you make a great point with Giant Stadium, or I guess MetLife Stadium in New Jersey. And actually, I've talked to the city manager in Kansas City a lot about this, a guy, who is from North Jersey, who I think is also kind of like, wait, what the heck are you all doing? Because he's like, yeah, there's a stadium in New Jersey. There's another baseball stadium in Queens. There's a hockey team in Long Island. There's it's just kind of what you're not seeing is, say, the city of New York and people in Manhattan say, oh, my God, we need to shoehorn in, a Jets football stadium right there. Mayor Bloomberg thought about it, but didn't. And instead, it was great to say, hey, let's get a lot more housing. Let's get a lot more businesses. Let's do all of that. So I love having the teams. I think it's important they have a deal. That's why I think Arrowhead Stadium in many ways works right now where it is. And that's not, saying Kansas is bad or whatever. It's just saying we got a bunch of highways and a giant parking lot next to a stadium that sits empty most nights of the year. And maybe there's a way we figure things out there for the good of the region. But, if not, let's at least do something that works for everybody and core to the point, and I know your listeners, makes sense for the taxpayers. The reason that we take sales taxes is so that we can actually help support other things. So we're not just paying crazy property taxes and all of that, and businesses aren't paying huge taxes, and they can invest in their businesses and in our communities. It seems like we've lost the script, left and right, over recent months, and it has been a doozy to watch. I'm not going to be in every debate about it. You're probably my only extensive interview about it, and after that, I'm moving on to talk about all the other things we got to do.
And we will certainly be doing that again next week, but with the news cycle where it is this week, of course, this is the topic of conversation. And by the way, John Anthony, Baker's finest graduate, is very happy that you're wearing your Baker gear this morning here on KCMO. Hey, last thing, just real quick. I know your chief of staff, Morgan, left. There was some talk about that in the media last week. She was instrumental in getting this interview set up on a weekly basis back in 2020. What's next for her? She kind of I sent her a nice little text just saying, thanks for all your work. Appreciate you setting this up. She sent me some cryptic text saying, one day I'll tell you the full backstory on how she set this whole thing up between us. I understand you may not want to share it on the air, but what's next for her? Why is she leaving?
She's one of the best. And if you can't say, and I know I have become at times a liberal pariah and all of that, but she is one of my favorite hires because, as you may remember, when I started my office, I took her from a Republican U.S. Senator's office. I hired a Republican former federal prosecutor. I had progressives. I had conservatives because I think that's what helps the city move forward. Kansas City, at its core, is a moderate place. And it's a moderate, balanced place where you figure things out, whether there's stadiums or public safety at a certain point or any of the other issues out there. And, I haven't batted 1,000. I'll admit that as much as anybody. But, her hire was one of the good ones, and I think she speaks to what we need to be in this area. In terms of the future for her, she remains to help us out on a few big events. The U.S. Conference of Mayors is one of them. A few other kind of national connections we've made. Not only did she connect me with Pete Mundo, but she also helped connect me with the White House and others. And so we've appreciated that. I think her next act was to get out of politics for a little while. It's, it's an interesting business where we live in this kind of unreal world where we think everybody cares about what we're doing, but normal people are saying, look, man, I'm just trying to take care of my kid. And so, I think she's going to get a little time to do that. I think her career will probably be forever connected to American politics. She's worked for Republicans. She's worked for Democrats. So, maybe that means a private sector where she tells all of us what makes sense. But whatever it is, I wish her well. Good native Kansan who's made good impact in Missouri. And I appreciate her for setting up this interview, which I like to think is 15 minutes of sanity in American politics once every week, because you are able, Pete, with your questions of me, to get me to have liberals and conservatives angry at me each and every week. And I appreciate that.
Well, I lose a lot of sleep trying to make that happen every Thursday morning here on KCMO Talk Radio. So, and, credit to you as well for doing it. We need more of these conversations happening in this country, and we need to encourage that every single day. So, Mr. Mayor, thank you as always. We appreciate the time, and we'll get back to the business of Kansas City next Thursday morning here on KCMO.
Hey, we'll talk soon. Have a great day in Abilene. Have a great weekend, everybody.
You as well. That is Quinton Lucas on 95.7 FM.